Well, good evening, everyone. It is 6:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just to talk a little bit about our power hours, we will always do our best to start on time and end on time. So our power hours are structured to go from 6:30 to 7:30. The idea behind them is to have two-way dialogue to the extent possible, which means that we will provide some information for the first 30, 40 minutes tops. And then the second 20 to 30 minutes is the time for our community to ask questions, and we could have our Q&A. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Thank you for your commitment to such an important topic and wanting to learn more about it. We have, unfortunately, had a focus on school safety and mental health, more unfortunately around the school safety part, because of the environmental things that we've seen happen across the nation way too many times. We've spent a lot of our time over the course of the last 5 or 6 years working very collaboratively and closely with national and state and local experts on the topic. On both topics, because they are very connected. So as we present tonight and talk about school safety, you're going to see that we're also talking about mental health as both need our attention and both are interwoven. I want to thank our Board of Education members that are here tonight. We have a stray Board of Education member over there. I think we have our entire... We have so many wonderful PTSA people here and DPT members. We have a new resident from North Carolina here this evening. So it's great to have all of you with us this evening. I'd like to start by just sharing who's on the panel, and then I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Student Services.
My name is Jeff Beardsley. I'm the Director of Operations, Maintenance, and Security for the Pittsford Schools.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Barg, the Coordinator for Social and Emotional Learning for the district.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Biondi, the principal at Allen Creek School.
I'm Josh Walker. I am the principal right here at Calkins Road.
Good evening. I'm Linda Dickey, the assistant principal at Sutherland High School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shayna Kataya. I'm the Director of Student Services.
Okay, so with that, we're going to take the next 30 to 35 minutes and present some information to you. I would just ask that if you have questions as we're going on with our slides, if you want to jot them down so you don't forget them. All questions are certainly open. Our hope is that you're able to leave here with a level of understanding that you didn't have before, so you could feel a sense of comfort relative to the work that we're doing to keep our buildings, school, and community safe. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Shayna Kataya.
Great. Thank you. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to PTSA for providing the delicious snacks. So make sure you feel free to get up and grab yourself a little something as we go through the evening. What we wanted to do was just start, there's at least a few people at each table, is just have you think through a little bit what comes to mind when you think about school safety and mental health. Really just a few words, whatever comes to your mind first. So if you don't already know the people at your table, just take a minute, turn and introduce yourselves, and just share what comes to your mind when you think of those two terms. We'll give you just a minute to do that. Well, what we wanted to hopefully come to is an understanding of the really strong connection of these two terms. And so our objectives tonight are to really link those for everybody so they can understand that the mental health, the social emotional wellness of our students is deeply connected and is really the foundation of safety at school. And that when our students feel more connected at school, that we are all more safe physically and emotionally. And then we also want to make sure that everyone walks away with understanding what some of the strategies are and things that you might hear your children talking about as they're coming home, or things that you can ask them about. So some things that all students will be experiencing, and then we'll talk through some of the tiers of different approaches. And so I think the common thing you'll hear tonight is layers. So there's many, many layers around school safety. There's the social emotional layers, and then there's the physical layers. So we don't want to get stuck in just thinking about locks and visitor systems and badges and all of those things, but those are also very important. So we're gonna balance that and give a little bit of both tonight. So one of the things, just to start us off, is just to give you a sense of some of the terminology that you might hear. A lot of times, whether you're talking about academics or behavior, you're going to see this tiered approach. You might hear it called a multi-tiered system of support. You might hear it called response to intervention or response to instruction. And really, when you see this, it just means that we have things at each tier that we do to provide these different layers of support. So this tier 1 is really things that all students get, and it's enough for 80 to 85% of our students. So these are things that everybody experiences and has access to just as part of being a student in school. So we'll go through some examples of those. And then tier 2 is things that we use for smaller groups of students, different targeted either instruction or responses that are for 10 to 15% of our students, where that tier 1 wasn't enough. And then we have tier 3, that 5%-ish of our students that need even more, need more targeted, usually a team approach to be able to really get to the responses that are going to work for them. So along with that, you'll hear a lot of different terminology throughout just schools when you're hearing people talk about social emotional learning or around school safety. You have the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, and that really calls on us to create a welcoming and affirming environment for our students, giving them voice, giving them choice, making sure they feel connected, not just to their adults in the building, but also to each other. You'll hear about restorative mindsets. So that means that we're creating a space where students are taking accountability when there is harm and where they feel safe to be able to speak up and say something when harm is done to them or others. You'll hear a lot about trauma-informed classrooms, trauma-informed schools. So this recognition that, especially now, there's trauma that all of our students and many of all of us have been through just over the last 2 years, and that we don't always know the trauma, and it's not really up to us to judge what trauma or what event is bad enough for a student to have a really significant impact on them. So it's just being mindful that trauma impacts all of us in different ways. And then the importance of just having that emotional safety at school and how important that is in linking to our physical safety. So for our structure tonight, we're going to just look at these different tiers. So again, tier 1 is what all students receive. We'll give you just a few ideas of what that could look like. And then we have administrators, as you heard, from each building who will just highlight a couple of our key practices. Obviously, we could spend many hours going in deep on all of these, but we want to just highlight a few that you're likely to hear about or that your children will be experiencing coming this year or that they've already experienced. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie just to give a brief overview of what some of the different activities are at the tier 1 level.
Thank you. So as Shayna mentioned, when we talk about school safety and well-being, we certainly also need to focus on students who feel emotionally safe at school, connected to their teachers, peers, administrators, and those in their community, and have a place to turn when things are hard, when their peers are experiencing something, and they have someone that's ready to support and connect them to what they need. So at the tier 1 level, which is that universal, we're aiming for all students to have exposure. Certainly in previous forums, and we continue to talk about structures through our equity goal work, such as morning meetings at the elementary level, continuing to expand our offerings for access to community circles, K-12. Our counselors push into classrooms across the district and the levels to give dedicated and specific support and group lessons to all students. But a couple to really highlight tonight would be developing common language around what is school safety and what does it mean to belong. An example of that, and then we'll hear a little bit more, is this last year through the work of our Dignity Act coordinators, we really worked together to put together some training modules for students and staff that give everyone the common language around what is the Dignity Act, what are our responsibilities with that, and how can we connect to each other to make sure that everyone feels welcome, accepted, and included at school. And then how do we report when that's not happening, and how can we support? Also, too, in these modules that each building delivered to students and staff were learning in common language around the code of conduct and kind of what does that mean in practice. Also, that we'll hear in a minute is the Trusted Adult activity, and this is really important. We're at K-12 and asking every child in our schools, do you have someone to turn to in school who you are connected to or have a sense of trust with. You can connect it to see something, say something, and physical safety. We can connect that to mental health, and if you're struggling or a classmate is struggling, who can you turn to at the school level with a personal problem, an academic problem? So we'll hear a little bit more about how we're asking students K-12 that question, and then what do we do with that information if they're not feeling connected? How can we foster those connections to the students and to the families to make sure that they feel more welcome and included? And all of this connects back to school safety and feeling like a part of the community that's there to support and care. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Biondi, and he's going to share a little bit about what that looks like, that common language that's being developed in the schools and some resources around that, and then we'll hear from Josh Walker about the trusted adult work.
I'll try not to talk too long, Josh, because I want you to be able to have your chance to share. Thanks, everyone. So good evening. Talking about Tier 1, Stephanie mentioned about the practices and all of the instructional pieces that we do under Tier 1. Really what Tier 1, those practices are, is it's really a recipe for a positive, inclusive culture. All right? And it's the things that we do not separately in separate bubbles. We do it every day, all day, through everything we do. And the most important piece that helps us get to that is student voice and choice. Our students are really a significant part of building that culture. We want everyone to walk into our schools and not only see the posters on the wall and the quotes on the wall that you belong, we want you to feel that you belong. We want you to walk in and feel that you belong. Now, I'm not saying that's easy. There's challenges along the way, but we want to build a foundation that we know that when you walk into our school, it's a safe, respectful, and kind space for everyone. So one of the things that we do at Allen Creek and on the elementary level, Stephanie talked about common language. So an example for at least Allen Creek and all the schools, but at Allen Creek, for years we have been putting together, like all schools and all classrooms, what we call classroom rules. But we kind of changed the name to classroom compacts, meaning what do we all agree to do to be safe, to be respectful, and to be kind. And along with those compacts, we have those compacts in our classrooms. We have them for the bus. We have them in the cafeteria. We have them for recess. And it's all the common language that we use throughout the school in our community so we can be reflective and we could kind of look back and say, whether I'm talking to a kindergartner or a fifth grader, was it safe? Was it respectful? And was it kind? And so they can use it to restore after the fact, or they can use it to think about before they act or speak to do the right thing. And so, yes, it's up there. We have our bus compact. And as you can see, those are all things that kids helped us come up with and that they agree to do every day. And the bus drivers have agreed. And that also has built community in a sense because the bus drivers are feeling very valued. The kids are feeling that there's a trusted adult because we're all using the common language. So all these things together is what really promotes and teaches kids acceptance, empathy, support. We want to see kids use their voice for respectful debates and discussions, right? We want them to feel emotionally safe, right? But also, it can cross over into and should cross over into academics when we talk about using your voice. That's being a leader. That's using your voice, for example, in math. Just sharing your thoughts about how to get through a math problem. We call that number talks. So that's not about restorative or social emotional learning, but it is student voice. And kids are learning from each other. They're also feeling good about sharing their process and their mental thinking, even if it doesn't come out with the right answer. They feel safe in that environment. So I would say, really, it all starts with building relationships and building a culture where kids and adults feel safe, feel respectful, and feel kind. Okay, so I will, I guess, turn it over to a trusted adult for me would be Mr. Walker, because I send all my kids to him, to Hawkins Road, and so you're my trusted adult.
Thanks, Mike. So continuing on that relationship piece and that student voice is that trusted adult activity that, and I'll speak through Hawkins Road lens, but I know that it goes on in our secondary buildings, especially at the middle schools. Although it looks a little different at the high schools, but very similar. This is a great activity that really works in two different directions, both the kid focus and the teacher focus. So I'll take you through it really quick. The end goal is that the students are identifying a trusted grown-up in the building, and notice I did not say teacher, a trusted adult in the building that they could go to in need. Whatever that need may be. It may be as simple as I need to just help with some organization to I need to talk about something, or I need help finding a resource. So it's done about the middle of the year to give time for relationships to start to develop, people to know their students. You wouldn't want to do this in September or even October, and you wouldn't want to do it in April or May because at that point you don't have time to respond to the information that you're getting. So around the middle of the year, our mental health staff, our counselors, our school psychologists, mental health specialists, our assistant principal, myself, will go into, in the past years, we've used our PE classes and do activities with the students, get into small groups, talk about what it means to have a trusted adult. And a lot of our students say, well, it's my parents. Then that's great. That's fantastic. They should be your trusted adults. We're talking about the building, which some of the kids, their parents are in the building. We do try to get them to go somewhere else. But, somebody in the building, Hawkins Road, during the day. And the students, at the end of the activity, will fill out postcards identifying their trusted adult and why. So I'll give you an example. My colleague to my right, I would say, is my trusted adult because I know that I could speak to Mike. I could speak to Mr. Biondi about something that's troubling me, and I know that he'll take care of me. So those postcards are filled out by our students, 600 plus students. Our counselors go through all of the cards, and those cards are delivered to those adults. And I'll tell you, what a magical thing for those adults to get those cards. I know Mike would be touched if the card came from me, but I'll just say, as the building principal, after he read it, right? As the building principal, sometimes I'm not the person, right? I'm the heavy, but to get a card in my mailbox from somebody that I've had a relationship with, and sometimes that I didn't know that I had that impact with, I've had to close my door and have a moment. All right? And those things happen throughout the building. So those adults are seeing like, wow, I am making these connections. I am having an impact. That's great. And the students are able to identify this is somebody that I can go to. And it just helps to continue to nurture that relationship. So unfortunately, some of our students may not feel that they have a trusted adult. They may identify nobody, and they can say that. And so that's data, that's information. So what happens when that occurs is our counselors, and again, the mental health team, they'll work with the teachers, the teams, the club advisors, maybe there's some social groups, coaches, just reaching out for people to make that connection. Sometimes it might be peers. Hey, we've got some really great web leaders. We've got some really great peer mentors. We're gonna kind of facilitate that first couple of steps in a connection to start with that, and then maybe that grows into ultimately that trusted adult activity. Hey, I go to this club Come with me to games group. Let's go to games group together. And next thing you know, that child who couldn't identify a trusted adult now has 3 advisors to a club that they've grown into a relationship with. So that's the data that goes year to year. So we get this information around January, February, and that works through the rest of the year and then into the fall. So we start the year knowing, okay, these students had struggled identifying a trusted adult going into 7th, going into 8th grade, going into 9th grade, and we can say these are the ones that we want to keep a little extra eye on, some extra care. The flip side of that is the faculty will do what we call the dot activity, because we used to do it on posters with little dot stickers. Every single student in the building, every single adult in the building goes through and identifies, yes, I know Mike Biondi. That's my example. I know Mike Biondi. I know if Mike Biondi's having a good day. I know if Mike Biondi's having a bad day. And then we look for those students that maybe there's no adult in the building that says, I don't know this kid that well. And so the same conversations take place. We want to make sure that we're reaching out, making those connections. I'll speak to one teacher/coach at Calkins Road. He coaches a winter sport, and he loves this activity because he's like, those are the kids I go to. As soon as we know that maybe this kid is struggling to identify a trusted adult, he goes and he recruits that person for his team, because now they've got a group of 30 to 40 people that they have that commonality with on the team, a few adults that are coaching, and that's his outreach and that he does. And he's incredible at it. And actually, I'll say the end of the story, one of the kids that was that situation won a couple sectional titles in that sport while he was in high school. So just going out and grabbing that kid that didn't have the connection ended up really giving that kid a pathway, which was excellent. So what's great about the trusted adult piece, like I was saying, is it's in 2 directions, both through the student lens and through that teacher lens. And with all of that and all of those eyes on every single name, that's why we're really confident that we're trying to connect with every single child. Because if every child feels that connection, as Mike has said, Stephanie and Shayna, then they feel safe, and I'm reading the compact, respected, and kind in our buildings. And the thing that I wrote down when Mr. Pirro started talking, and I've heard it echoed by every single person, is just, it's what we do. It's what we do is we connect with these kids. So, off to Shayna.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think the most important part about some of those activities is the conversations that happen while they're taking place. So while the teachers are having those going through the activity, they're talking to each other about, like, oh, I didn't know that you had a connection with this student, or tell me more about this student. So these are things that have really just become part of the fabric of our culture, and that we're doing K through 12. So we're going to move up the ladder now to Tier 2. And of course, some of these things fall into different tiers. But some of the things that we have for our students that may help them connect when all of those Tier 1 activities or programs are not enough to help them get the support that they need or make the connections that they need. We have lots of clubs and different programs in the schools. We have many affinity groups, especially at the secondary level, for students to be able to be with students that are similar to them in different ways and different in different ways. We have a lot of people who are working on restorative practices in the school. So if there's a conflict between students, being able to actually sit down with them and have some mediation happening or some restorative circles or conversations. We have many community partners that you'll continue to hear about that we'll talk through. One of them to highlight is Pittsford Youth Services. So all of our students have access to Pittsford Youth Services, which is school social work that happens within our schools in K through 8. And then we can even refer out to them for students who need something more beyond what they can have during the school day. So that can fall into the Tier 2 or Tier 3 level. But you see the things like the classroom lessons with counselors where at the tier 1 level, everyone might be learning about the counselor pushing in and talking about anxiety and how to handle general anxiety that happens throughout the school year, or talking about how to handle peer situations that might happen. So at the tier 2 level, that might look like having a special small group counseling for families in transition, or for students who are really struggling with anxiety, really struggling with peer or social issues, that they just need a little bit more, so they might have a regular lunch bunch or a group that works with their counselor. That would be an example of taking that tier 1 and bringing it up to the tier 2 level. And as we were mentioning around those trusted adult activities or those screeners or those check-in surveys that we're doing with our students, the tier 2 piece becomes, what are we doing with that? How are we having conversations about the kids who don't have someone they connect to? Or when we're sitting around trying to brainstorm around a student, going back to that list and saying, who was the trusted adult for that student? How can we bring them into the conversation more? And one of the really important programs that we have at our high schools that I was really happy to be able to go and see part of just a couple weeks ago is the Sources of Strength program. It's actually really falls under suicide prevention program, but it's about leveraging the strengths that students have to be able to serve as peer connectors for each other to get to the resources that they have, and they plan some really amazing activities. And it starts with a training activity that the students go through who are selected and agree to be part of the Sources of Strength program. And I was so happy and grateful to be able to go see that happen at Sutherland High School, and Mrs. Dickey runs that program there, and so I will turn it over to her to give us some highlights about what Sources of Strength looks like in our schools.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And actually, I'm the administrator in charge of Sources of Strength. It's ran by Kat Kramer, one of our art teachers, but I went through training, and it's an amazing program. As Shana said, Sources of Strength is a tier 2 intervention in which it's still about building connections. We've heard about it at the elementary level, in middle school, and this is what we're doing at the high school. It's an international program. It's evidence-based. It's a comprehensive wellness program. It was originally started to help prevent suicide, but the skills and the training is to help prevent violence, bullying, and substance abuse. The program's about relational connections, and we use peer leaders and adult advisors. And what we're trying to do is have the peers to change their social norms about help seeking and encouraging to individually assess and develop the strengths in their lives. There's 8 sources of strength. Those include positive friends, mentors, healthy activities, generosity, spirituality, physical health, mental health, and family support. You might see some of these in the secondary level at Minden or Sutherland, and it has what Sources of Strength is about and the 8 sources of strength. Peer leaders and adult mentors are trained, as Shana said. I went through a training a few weeks ago with about 100 students and about 10 adult advisors. And I was trying to multitask, as administrators often do. I was like, well, let me go in and out, and I'll go to this part. And my colleagues are like, no, you've got to sit for the whole thing because it's connected. And I was so happy and so just amazed at the training program and really the connections, and particularly being new to Sutherland. I really got to connect with 100 different students that I might not have seen, and with colleagues as well. It was just such an enriching and empowering experience. We do have a partnership with the University of Rochester that came in and did the training. The peers are selected by other peers. The recommendations are made from other peers. It's at both high schools, and it is a cross-section of everyone in the school. So it's not just the athletes, or it's not just the brainy, it's everyone. They make sure that it's a representation of the different groups in the high school. One of the activities we did is similar to the Trusted Adult. This was a thank you for being a source of strength in my life. And so at the end of our training, we filled out cards to the people in Sutherland, the adults that were a source of strength. And I filled out a few as well. I was like, do we have to pick just one? And it was so powerful to see 100 students write to the different staff and faculty members. And then we went around the whole circle and they mentioned who the adults were. And not one student of those 100 students, none of them said, I don't have a trusted adult. We saw a lot of themes. And some of the students are like, can I have more than one card? Because there are adults more than one, which is very powerful. So that's sources of strength in a nutshell. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Now, when I walked in the gym and saw the multi-purpose room, and saw all of these students, the first thing I saw was Linda. I thought she looked like she was just about to explode with joy. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is maybe the third week of school, and as a new administrator, just to be able to be interacting with kids in this way and doing weird things like taking your shoes off and holding them over your head, and all these great things that they were doing to connect with kids. It was such a powerful program. So we're very grateful we have that. Thank you for sharing. And we are going to shift and briefly just talk about some of the Tier 3 different supports and what those look like. And Stephanie's going to highlight a few of those.
So at that top layer of need, that 5 to 10% of students who, everything that we're doing to build connection and relationship and make sure that they're ready to go to who they need to get their support, there's always a population that we really just need to do a little bit more for, and that might be within our school walls, it might be connecting to resources in the community, working with families. So certainly it's a team approach, as we've mentioned, across the presentation tonight, and that looks different across the levels, from our middle school teaming structures to our elementary professional learning communities at the grade level. K-12, what's really come out of some dedicated resource mapping and needs assessment over the past few years is a school mental health team structure that meets regularly to connect across the different members of the school mental health team, plus the administrators, right up to the health office, because we're all a community of care, and we're really wanting, especially at that Tier 3 level, to wrap students in care and connection to what they need and involve families as well. Something that's newer in terms of our structure and teaming is called the Behavior Intervention Team, or the BIT team, and that's a phenomenally powerful case management structure related to threat assessment and very directly related to both school safety and mental health. So based on, as Mike mentioned when we started, structures and trainings we've had from our Board of Education this summer, with over 100 people coming together to have instruction and learning around threat assessment and managing resources to prevent school violence. We've worked with the FBI, we've worked with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, and we formed this teaming structure that goes K-12, starts at the building level with the building BIT teams who meet on a regular basis to have conversations about students who might be at risk for harming themselves or others, and then what do they need to connect to care. The building team then can elevate a case, and they can get additional multidisciplinary level support at the district BIT team. And that's really sort of leading the way, the structure, in terms of school violence prevention and mental health. And the district BIT team includes certainly district staff and mental health staff, administration, but we also partner with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, who's a standing member. We have access to the Office of Mental Health. We have a standing member who joins the district teams, and also the FBI as needed. And then we can also access ROCTAC, which is a community resource, the Rochester Threat Assessment Council, who's informed some of our work, and also we can reach out to with cases. It's really about wrapping and connecting families and kids, anyone in our school community who might be struggling with threat to self or others, with the right resources to turn that around, feel better connected and accepted at school, take care of any mental health needs that we need. And I would also say, from speaking with ROCTAC members, other counties in New York State are coming to Monroe County to learn about this structure. How can we implement it back in our communities? So we're really lucky to be at the forefront of some of the work around preventing violence and threat in the community. Another resource, as we talk about community resources, we have a phenomenal partnership with the University of Rochester Medical Center. We have an expanded school mental health initiative that, again, is that tiered approach to care. We have that Tier 1 level where we're building staff capacity and awareness around mental health, behavioral support, classroom instruction, how do we support families, and that's ongoing. We have a consultation level at the Tier 2 where school teams in partnership with families can access a clinical psychologist at the U of R. They come either to our schools to be in site, we can do this virtually, and we have conversations around care for students. And then we also have a satellite clinic, which happens to be housed at Barker Road, but it's accessible for all K-12 families. And that is a clinical support. It's a satellite clinic of the U of R Pediatric Behavioral Health and Wellness Clinic right on site here in Pittsford. And we can make referrals for students to access that, basically a clinical level of care closer to home. I would say the very best place to start when you have concerns about mental health, safety, security, anything related to any of that care is to reach out to your child's counselor, school mental health team, or the administrator, and we can start to connect you to that. And then I'm going to turn it back to Shana, actually. One additional Tier 3 new program is our tutoring center, and that also sort of really looks to connect students who might have different things going on in their lives, stay connected to the school community and feeling like we're there and we care and we'll support you through it.
Great, thank you so much. So before I turn it over to talk about the physical safety layers that are in place, the tutoring center is something brand new this year that we are very excited about. So students, when they are not in school, whether it's for a suspension where they're not in school or a medical reason, which could be a physical reason or an emotional reason that they're not in school. Previously, we partnered with and contracted through BOCES to get tutoring, which is very challenging, and sometimes they were not able to, not because BOCES is challenging, but because it's challenging to get staff. And so they were sometimes not able to connect a tutor in a reasonable time period to be able to get that student academic support. We're now doing that right in Pittsford in our schools, right at district office. So we've hired a special education teacher who is the tutoring center coordinator, and now students don't miss any time of actually physically coming into school. So regardless of the reason that they're out, they are our students, and they're not excluded from the school community, and that allows us not only to keep them connected to their academics, but also to their counselors, to their teachers, their administrators, people who can come over and just see them on a daily basis when they're not in school, which really helps us, especially for students who may have emotional reasons, needs that are keeping them from school, helps us get them back to school. They're getting up, they're coming in, and that's a really good way to transition them back. So we're very excited about that. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent to talk about some of the physical safety layers that are in place.
Just quickly before I do it, I think it's important to think about in your own families. If you have 3 children in your families, there's probably a good likelihood that all 3 are a little bit different. I know in my family there is a range of differences. We have 6,000 students in our building, so we have 6,000 differences, 6,000 unique kids that come to us every day, and that's 12 to 14,000 parents or guardians that are in our school community. That's 20,000 different people that we connect with annually, and everyone needs something different. And so our goal is to create some commonalities that we know are good for all kids, which are the Tier 1, many of which you heard about today. I think that one of my biggest takeaways during this process is we can't assume what we know about students because of how they are positioning themselves or how they're looking when they walk through school, that we have to continuously remind ourselves that every student has their own story. So I just want to talk about the tutoring center really quickly. When I went into the tutoring center, I was not in trouble. There were 3 students that were in there, and it was their 2nd or 3rd day in the tutoring center. Tongue in cheek, I asked them individually. 2 were in one room, 1 was in the other room. Aren't you happy you weren't suspended and have to stay at home watching TV? And their answer was yes. So they were in school and enjoyed what they were experiencing more than having to be at home on their own during those 3 to 4 to 5 days. And then you get to roll up your sleeves and talk about the why behind that. And then you get to peel that onion a little bit more to find out what's happening at school or what's happening at home, so you can support them appropriately. So a big part of the tutoring center is not just to make sure that academically the students are getting what they need, but to also be able to push in counselors and other trusted adults and to connect with students in a different way. So I want to thank everyone on this panel for supporting the tutoring center and for getting it going, and for the taxpayers for voting for it. It's something that's truly been remarkable. When we think about the physical plant and how we're set up right now, it's typically thinking about worst case scenario is when we do most of our planning around this. This planning is not done in isolation. We've worked with a national and state consultant. We work in harmony with Monroe County Sheriff's Department. Jeff is an expert in the area as well. On my phone, on our phones, I think we probably have between the two of us 4 or 5 different cell phone numbers of sheriffs that we can call. And they would always call us right back, and they could be here, and they have been here in a heartbeat when we need them. So our relationship with Monroe County Sheriff's Department is, I would say, second to none. One of the things that we've just recently done with the Sheriff's Department is had our badges, these badges, scanned so that every single vehicle in the Zone B area, Zone A or Zone B? Zone A. The Zone A area for the sheriffs that are given a certain area that they have to be responsible for. Every car has our badges in them. And so if there's ever an emergency, we don't have to wait. They don't have to wait for someone from the school to give them keys. They have the same access I do and across all of our buildings. So when we talk about worst case scenario, we talk about what is the quickest response. When we think about active shooter, how can we respond as quickly as possible? One, how can we prevent? A lot of what you heard about was preventing it from the lens of disenfranchised students that never felt like they belonged in school, or many other reasons. But if it happens, what we know is the response time is critical. Our response time from Monroe County Sheriff's Department is about 2 to 3 minutes on average. Where we're situated within the zone is ideal. They're also doing a lot more, and you'll see this more when they have paperwork to do. They will do that paperwork often in our parking lots. But we have that connection where we know that they're going to get there quick. Looking at different studies and worst case scenario things that have happened in the past, a lot of it is how people are getting into the building. We have really done a full-blown campaign on single point of entry this year. It's still not good enough. So we have one building or one door where everyone has to come in through. In the morning and afternoon, it does get congested, so we do open up, depending at what level, 1 or 2 other doors that are stationed with an adult there that also are responsible for making sure the door locks behind. But if we all do our job, that means that none of us should be able to get into Calkins Road during the school day without going through the main door. We do have some more work to do regarding secure vestibules at our elementary schools. That you'll see in a capital project that we'll be sharing more about this year. But we need to have those secure vestibules as well. A big part of our physical response is technology. And when we deal with technology, the hard part is it changes over time. We have we were state-of-the-art security cameras, and they are starting to get a little bit older, so we're going to have to replace some of them. But we do have state-of-the-art response systems. We have several different buttons that have different responses when pressed. So if there was a worst-case scenario situated in the main office where everyone should be coming through, it's a push of the button, and that activates many things. It immediately sounds the PA system with an automated pre-made announcement that says we are now in a lockdown. On everyone's screens in all of their classrooms, they will see a line going across that says that we are in lockdown. we automatically turns on our intercoms and calls 911. All of that with a push of the button, so we know that we're able to notify the sheriffs, 911, students, staff, visitors, all that we're in a lockdown within a couple seconds. Once in lockdown, part of our improvements over the years has been the intruder locks, which means that you do not have to go outside in the hall to lock your door. You can shut your door and lock it from the inside. And all of those types of things in tandem act as a mechanism to buy time where intruders can't get into our building or can't get into our classrooms once in the building as we wait for a response. We've done a ton of different drills with our adults. We've gone through run, hide, fight training. We have regular routine drills annually for lockdowns, which can be scary, so we do our best to try to prepare people in advance that these are obviously drills. We have other things. When we see, we have a button at different locations with the secretaries if there's an agitated parent or an agitated visitor, where when pressed it alerts our building safety teams that there's going to need additional support in the main office. So we're doing everything we can relative to our physical plant. We're going to have to be very cognizant of keeping up with the technology, keeping up with the training, continuously working with different experts in the field. But I feel as we benchmark where we are, we're in as good a shape as we could be, with the one area of improvement, I think, being some of our elementary schools' main entrance. So I want to just end there because I do want to leave time for questions. I'm sorry we're running a little bit late, and I'm going to have Shana give us the last piece of information that's the newest.
Great, thank you. Yes, the last thing you'll see there is anonymous reporting mechanisms. So what you've probably seen online is the ability to go on and report around bullying, harassment, DASA-type incidents. Something we're going to be adding that we're really just unveiling here for the first time outside of our school staff is something called the Safe Schools Helpline. And this is something you may have seen in some other districts. It's been around for about 25 years, and it's an anonymous reporting mechanism, and it's also a connection to care outside of the school day. So this is a system that is 24/7, 365 days a year. It is manned by mental health counselors and triage teams that are actually able to take the tips that come through here and either provide support to people immediately or be able to triage that help right out to the school or the local police force. And so you'll be seeing that early November, so very soon. And this will be a link online on the website, and it's also this tip line, so someone can receive mental health supports outside of school, and then anything that we need to know about that might be physical harm, emotional harm that could be in place for one of our students or staff members gets reported back to the school through a number of different mechanisms. And then it also, if there's any type of real threat to the school, they will immediately contact not only the superintendent and other people within the district, but also the local police. And so we are happy to be able to have this as another resource to be able to bring as just more of that layered approach to have this anonymous tip line as well. So you'll certainly be hearing more about that in the upcoming days. I think with that, we want to turn it over for questions. So there are index cards on your table. I know we're a pretty small group. If anyone wants to raise hands, I'm happy to walk around and bring you a microphone, or you're welcome to write something down if you would rather do that. Yes, Tamara.
Good evening. So I had a youth at Sutherland, and I never thought about it when I entered the building. And so I have a 7th grader at Calkins Road, and when I'm outside, I have to push a button. That makes me feel good because the person on the other side lets me in, and she can identify me immediately or say, I don't have any idea. But I went to Minden for the PTS, for open house to help out as a PTSA member. I was so uncomfortable. Honestly, some of you know me. I worked 41 years as a teacher and administrator. I was so uncomfortable entering Minden. But I've been to Sutherland so many times, but I didn't think of it. And what I was thinking about, that area, I don't know if you call that the vestibule for Minden, but it's not good. I felt unsafe as a person who worked in schools for a long time. I said, this is not good. What you have at Calkins Road, somehow you have to duplicate it at Minden and Sutherland. And I see children coming in, and I'm thinking, I'm not an engineer. I don't know if the children need to use their IDs to swipe to come in, but I just thought about it, and I thought, oh my gosh, people could rush right in the time. I'm just sharing that. I just felt uncomfortable. And I looked at the person on the other side of the glass. I said, this is what's happening? And so let's work on that. Let's work on that. We have a wonderful school district, but we want no tragedies. It doesn't take much for somebody to come into a building with a gun and destroy lives.
Thank you. It's amazing where our mindset needs to be right now, and it has to be there. We've had amazing feedback from families for having our graduations at the home fields. How do you keep that secure? How do you keep games secure? But we're moving it to RIT, again, because there's metal detectors. We have a large group of people together. We have police there. We have all of that. So we're looking at it from all different angles as far as when we have kids that are together, what are we doing to keep them safe? Single point of entry is an issue that we are working on. So thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for putting this together. Extremely helpful and informational. I had a question about when you identify someone for Tier 2 or Tier 3 needs, do you work with the parents to let them know that, hey, your kid is, is assumed to be in Tier 2 or 3, and do you work together with the parents if that's identified?
Yeah, so typically when students get to that Tier 2 or Tier 3 level, parents have been involved along the way because they're certainly part of that team approach. So even if you look at something like a counseling group, parents should always be aware that that's something that it may be taking place for their child so that they can also support at home. So yes, parents should always be involved at that level. Especially in some of the clinical care pieces, they would be heavily involved, and they would actually be the ones, we're helping them make those referrals, but we're really doing it on their behalf and with the parents. Yeah, very good question.
Thank you for the wonderful panel presentation. I have learned a lot from today's workshop, and I have one quick question here corresponding to Mr. Perro's interpretation. Every student is different. And there are introvert students, there are extrovert students. So for some introverts, they might not want to be open to an adult, or they might not want to tell you who they want to trust. So do you have different strategies for these students, or like you just make universally the same strategy? Thank you.
Go ahead.
So that's where I really, sorry. This is my cafeteria. I'm just used to yelling, so I'll be better. So that's a great question, because hopefully what you've taken from this is there is no one size fits all. This all has to be responsive and individualized. The great thing about that trusted adult activity, yes, it's a single activity, but it starts individual conversations and connections that, yes, it's just going to be baffle some people that know me. I was a big time introvert in school, so something that would have been, hey, let's get you connected with somebody would not have worked for me. Our mental health staff, our counselors, our teachers are really, really good at this to find that one piece. And it may be something very subtle, but just that person has that connection that, you're right, they may not need or they may not want to put it out there, but that's where those individual conversations and connections with families are so important. I hope that helps.
Helps too, just having such diverse interests and abilities and personalities among our staff too, because you have teachers who, you know, some students will say like, really, that's your person? Like, that's their person, right? So everybody needs a little bit something different. And so that's why it's exciting to see those cards in the mailboxes because it really means a lot to the teachers that, you know, it's something unique to them that spoke to that student as well. So great question. Anybody else?
Hi, I know we're running low on time here, but about a year ago, students at Sutherland and Mendon arranged a walkout due to concern about the response to a really concerning safety incident. And in that walkout, they chanted safety over rep again and again. Just, I want to echo and amplify that student voice that they really want to feel safe and for safety to be a priority over the reputation of the district. And you know, in talking with students, I hear them saying, like, it's great that things are happening, but they don't always feel that things are improving yet. And I really want to make sure we're listening to that student voice and finding ways so they feel safe. And when they don't feel safe, what are those supports that are in place, especially for those who come from marginalized groups who we know are at risk based on the surveys from Pittsford, and we know based on national data, they need more support. And there's a lot of things that I think we need to continually respond to and improve. So I don't think that's something that could be addressed in 2 minutes, but perhaps more intensive interventions and supports for specific students. That would be great.
I would just add that we have, all of us at all of our buildings, different student level, student-led groups that we're all involved in, and a big part of it is student-led discussion and listening to our students. I was with 18 of very diverse students in my advisory group this week, and we put it out there. We talk about how they're feeling, and I think that the students would say that they're feeling and seeing things change. I think that the secondary principals would hear the same thing from their students. And the answer is we're never going to be there, because the second we're there and become complacent, then we've lost. So we need to keep our finger on the pulse. We need to keep improving. We need to amplify student voice. And we need to keep our schools safe in every aspect. Thank you. Thank you for the comment.
So we spent a lot of time talking about social emotional learning and aggressive deadly behavior, which is what people automatically think of when it comes to school safety. I think probably statistically and locally, anecdotally, recently we've seen that many children are more at risk from school staff than aggressive deadly behavior incidents, and that's something that we never hear any attention focused on. But locally, as recently as today, that's been an issue. What are you guys doing to make sure our students are safe from predators that work in schools that are amongst your colleagues?
So I think that the see something. Yeah. So it's a fair question, right? So I guess I can only speak to Pittsford, and I don't know if there's any one thing anyone can do to be immune in any profession to prevent something like this from happening. But it certainly starts with our hiring. It starts with our background checks. It starts with getting real thorough reference checks and letters of recommendations, following up on them. It also around some best practices, so not meeting with a student alone with the door shut is not permissible. So some of those real common things that are expectations across the board. We also do a lot of work in our buildings at the secondary level, middle school, and elementary relative to working in teams, working in tandem. We have a very active administration walking and teacher leaders that are observing. So those are some of the things. We do have practices in place that our expectations relative to our interactions with kids. Everything from, and here's the hard part too, is you never know, right? So your point was perfect, but all we can do is look at our practices and policies to minimize, and so I guess it would start with the hiring part and then how our operation works during the day. I don't think you would ever see a student, especially now that it's been amplified with the door shut, working with a teacher. Yeah. You wouldn't see a student in a car driving home with a teacher. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that question.
I think still on. I think that's a very fair point, and all of the things that we've mentioned here, and all of the collective trauma that people have been under over the last couple years, that's really been a big focus of ours as well. It's not just social emotional for our students, but also for our staff. So the superintendent led us as a leadership team through looking at those same tiers of what are we doing to support staff. What tier 1 things do we do to support staff? At the tier 3 level, what do we have? Making sure that we're connecting staff to the help that they need, and that we're recognizing that. And then also this threat assessment process, the behavior intervention team that we spoke of, that's also for adults. So either within our buildings, if we're seeing something that doesn't seem quite right and we need more intervention potentially, or even from outside, whether it's a parent or other community member that we may have concerns, that we want to have those conversations just to see what else can we be doing to help connect that person to supports that they may need as well.
So this will, or is being videotaped. It will be accessible on our webpage. Tonight's conversation is really hard, especially in light of some of the things recently that have happened in our schools regionally. It's a hard topic. These are the topics that keep us all up at night, and probably many of you up at night. We need to continue to get better. We need to continue to work together. We need to, as a community, to big time see something, say something, and we need to watch out for one another. We're neighbors from one another, and in Pittsford schools, we're doing our best to keep our kids safe, and hopefully every day, or every month and every year, you're seeing improvements in that, and from a lot of different regards and aspects. Want to thank you. Have a real safe drive home, and it's supposed to be beautiful this weekend, so try to get out and enjoy it while it lasts. Thanks, everyone. Thank you to the panel.